take a look at the menu system in the D3200. Are there any particular menu functions that you tend to use that you can remember?
Nothing specific. I mean, the biggest one is set the date.
Yeah.
Set the time and things like that. I want to keep that in order. Typically, the ones I use the most would be the I menu. I don't typically go into the actual menu functions too much.
Oh, okay. So one of the first things that can be very important if you want to see the information on your picture, like your histogram and all that kind of stuff, this right on the top on the playback options. If you come back to playback display options, additional info, it gives you a bunch of check boxes for highlights, RGB histogram, shooting data, overview. If you check at least highlights, RGB histogram, and shooting data, and possibly even overview, it'll give you some nice information that you can look at after you take a picture. And on these Nikon models, that's not turned on by default when you first get your camera. If you want to see that, you have to come in here and turn that on. So that to me is an important thing to do. And here's what it does for you. When you play a picture, when you hit the up arrow on this wheel, it will add all kinds of additional information. And this screen in particular is really important because it shows you all the metadata of how the image was shot. And it will show you your histogram, and that's how you can tell if you have a good exposure or not. And then if you keep going, it'll give you more and more information. Every time you hit the up arrow, it gives you different information about how the shot was taken, even the RGB histogram in addition to the luminance histogram, which is the white one. So that's an important menu thing to turn on. Also back in the menu, there is a delete function and there is a delete button on the camera. You could use them occasionally, but I wouldn't recommend using that delete function all the time. And the reason is these cards, just like a hard drive, can accumulate some errors if you keep deleting and you never clean your card. So somewhere later in the menu will show you there is a format function. So what you really should do is fill up your card and then dump it into your computer and back it up and then put the card back into the camera and do a full format. That way you have a clean card that's not building up these errors that could give you any kinds of problems. All right? So let's see what else. I'm not going to go through every single thing in the menu system because the Nikon menu system is really in depth. There is a lot of stuff there, and most of it you don't need to touch, except for very specialized situations. Rotate tall, you have that turned on. That would be like if you take a vertical image, it'll automatically rotate the image vertical on your screen so that you can see it vertically. If not, you'll see, by having this turned off, it can be good because you'll see your vertical image much larger on your screen, but you'll have to kind of turn the camera to see it in its vertical form. So it depends what you like better. If you like to see it bigger, turn this off.
Okay.
But if you like seeing it tall right away, you can leave that to on. It does do slideshows and prints and all that stuff, but you're probably not going to ever use that very much. The second one is the camera menu. And one of the important things here is this set picture control, because this determines how the camera is going to process your JPEG images. And so they give you things like standard, neutral, vivid, monochrome, portrait, and landscape, because the camera is sort of doing like a little photoshopping to your image as far as the sharpness, the contrast, the hue and the saturation. All those things can be adjusted. So standard is going to give you a basic profile that will do a good job in most situations, but if you want to try some of these other ones, for example, neutral will just tone everything down. It won't be heavily saturated, it won't be heavily sharpened, and so if you like to work in Photoshop or Lightroom or something like that, an image shot in neutral will be easy to work with because not much has been done to it yet. Vivid, on the other hand, if you like your images really saturated, really punchy, things like that, you could try Vivid. It really enhances the colors. Of course, monochrome is like a black and white. It is better to convert your images to black and white in the computer, but if you do want a quick black and white out of the camera, it does do a pretty good job, so you can use monochrome. Then there's the portrait mode, and these modes usually tend to enhance the color red, brings out the the warmth in a person's face and things like that. And then the landscape mode, they tend to enhance the blues and greens. So obviously those that show up in a landscape photo a lot, green grass, blue skies, and it really enhances those colors. So those are some good options. If you shoot JPEG images, you should really know about those picture controls. If you shoot in RAW, they don't really matter because the raw file doesn't get processed by your camera. However, the preview that you see on your screen will be affected by the picture control, even if you shoot a RAW file. It's just the actual RAW file won't be affected by that.
Okay.
Image quality is another important one that you might use, and here you have the option of shooting RAW or JPEG, and you should shoot, if you're going to shoot JPEG, shoot the largest, finest quality JPEG so you get the best output. You can always make it smaller in your computer, but you don't want to shoot it small and then try to make it bigger. You'll lose quality that way. And of course, if you're familiar with the computer, you are better off shooting in RAW because it will allow you to make more more wider adjustments in your software for fixing your image file. So that's fine, leaving it on JPEG. And then the next one, the image size, you have it on large, which is good. You want to shoot a large JPEG because, like I said, you can always make it smaller in the computer. White balance, you have it set to auto, and auto does do a pretty good job in most situations. White balance is all about the temperature of light. So if you shoot in a room that has tungsten light bulbs, that gives off a very warm orange glow. So by setting it the white balance, it takes away the orange so you don't get that orange in your picture. So auto does do a good job if you're not too used to your camera yet, if you don't really want to have to go into the menu every time, you could leave it on auto. But if you do want to control it a little more, when you go into this, there are settings for all the different kinds of light that you could run into, like incandescent is a regular household light bulb. Of course, fluorescent, that's a common indoor light bulb. And then we have sunlight, flash, cloudy, shade. And so pre is for where you could set a manual light balance. But to do that, you do need some sort of a gray card to set a custom white balance. And it's very easy to do. ISO sensitivity settings, you have it right here where you can pick your ISO. You can also pick your ISO in the I menu, so you don't necessarily have to do the ISO from here. Active D-lighting, you have that turned on, and that's good because what that does is it helps you in scenes that have a wide dynamic range, so very bright areas versus very dark areas, and it will help you from overexposing the really light areas. Noise reduction, this you could turn off for probably most shooting situations, but if you're going to do some long exposures, maybe some night photography, things like that, then it might be a good idea to turn on noise reduction. AF area mode, this is an important one. You're deciding how much area you're going to focus. So I like using the single point AF, where you can use one little autofocus point and really be specific about where you focus. If you want to try some other things, there is a dynamic AF area where it gives you just that center point, but it also gives you a couple little dots around the edges. That can be helpful if your subject's moving a little. And then you have the 3D tracking, which uses 11 of your auto points. And that's fine for a moving subject, but when you have all your spots turned on, if you're not really paying attention, sometimes the autofocus spots can accidentally focus on something you didn't want it to focus on. And then, or you could use an autofocus area, which would be like a block of space where it would use that space for focusing. Well, like I said, I prefer the top two, either the single point AF or the dynamic AF, but give those a try and see what you like. Built-in AF illuminator. What this does is, if you are trying to focus in a dark area, it will turn on this little light here. And that helps you to focus, right? If you find that to be annoying, you can come in here and turn it off. But whenever you're in dark situations, you may have a hard time doing autofocus without it. Here is your metering mode, but you can also get to your metering mode in the I menu, and maybe we'll take a look at the I menu after. Movie settings and flash control and so on. So there's some stuff in there that we probably wouldn't need to get into. But under the wrench, one of the most important things is, like I said, after you use your card, you should format it. So you make sure you download everything into the computer, back it up, and then put your card back in, and then right under the wrench, the second thing down, format your memory card. And it totally wipes it out. It's like starting with a new card every time, and you won't build up any of those errors. Monitor brightness, you probably would leave it at the middle of the road, an average thing. There might be some situations where you might make it a little brighter or darker, but usually just the middle of the road is all that's needed. There's a function for cleaning the image sensor, which basically kind of tries to shake the dust off of it. But there is a lock mirror up for cleaning. So if you notice that you have some dirt on your sensor, you can use that to clean it. And what you should do to see if you have dirt on your sensor is, one easy way is to take a picture of a blue sky and then look at that picture on your computer. And if you see a lot of like black blotches on your blue sky, that's dust on your sensor. So what you can do is hit this mirror lockup and take the lens off. And if you have a little blower, you can blow air up there and it might knock some of those dust particles off. If that doesn't work, if it's dirtier than that, you may want to take it to a camera shop to have it cleaned. You can buy a camera kit yourself with alcohol swabs and clean it off, but if you don't really know what you're doing, you're probably better off having a professional do it at that point. But as far as the air blower thing, anybody can do that, and it works most of the time pretty well. It does have settings for video and things like that. Let's see. The retouching menu, this is like kind of like they're trying to give you like a basic Photoshop in the camera. So you could come in here and do some things, but I doubt that very many people do, and it's because you're better off really to do this kind of thing in your computer. Get the pictures into the computer, use a program like Photoshop Elements or Lightroom or Photoshop or even something like, you know, Picasso or whatever. Some program where you can do some basic image editing would be better than trying to do it in the camera. And then it has like a favorites menu at the end here. So some of the functions that you use a lot, it puts down at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And so here your set picture control, your white balance, your image review, your ISO, a lot of the things in image quality, a lot of the things that you might go to a lot are all right there for you to get to quickly. So that's that internal menu. It's really got a lot of stuff in there. And you should review your manual if there's something specific that you need to do. But most of the time, you don't have to make adjustments in there once you have the camera set up right. Now, the menu that you will probably use a lot, though, is that I menu that we kind of mentioned earlier. When you press that I menu, you have access to a lot of the functions right here. One of the first one is that quality that we were talking about in the menu. It says, for example, image quality fine, large JPEG, that's something that we had in the other menu. And then white balance, you could right here switch it to, you know, incandescent or fluorescent or sunlight. So you have all those options there, or leave it on auto. And then here you also have your ISO. This is the autofocus area. We had a single spot chosen, but you could change it. Oh no, this is single shot, not focus point. So this will take pictures one at a time, so it's great for things that are not moving much and you're concentrating on getting a good composition for one picture at a time. Whereas the other one is the drive mode. So this is great anytime you've got a little bit of action going on. Your camera will shoot in bursts. This camera shoots 4 frames per second, so you know if you're trying to shoot sports or something like that, that's a great option. And then this other one, AFS, is the focusing mode that the camera is using. So AFS means that it's going to take it's going to focus once and lock and stay there. So that's usually the one you want for most situations. The other options, the AFC, that's continuous autofocus, and that would be the one you would want for shooting sports, where you have an object coming towards you and you want the camera to continuously focus on that object. You would use that AFC. And it does have this AFA. I don't really like that one very much because it'll focus once, and then if the object starts moving, it'll try to focus on it again. But to me, that one causes more problems than it's worth. So you're better off with either the AFS or the AFC. And then it also has manual focus here. Of course, you can focus manually directly with the lens. So we'll leave it on AFS. And then here, this little dot here, this is the focusing point that you're using. This is another area where you can choose that. And then we have a metering mode. And you have a few different metering modes. The matrix metering mode is the basic metering mode. And in that mode, it looks at basically the whole rectangle of light coming into the camera. And it tries to average the exposure for that whole rectangle. So it's good for most situations. That metering mode works pretty well. But whenever you have a subject that is backlit, when there's light behind the subject, you might want to try a metering mode that's tighter, like a center-weighted metering or even a spot metering, because now you can specifically meter directly off of the person or whatever the object is, and you won't have all that background light won't be throwing off what the camera is trying to meter. And then here it shows you your exposure compensation. So like I said, that is useful in program mode or aperture priority mode or shutter priority mode. And then there is also an exposure compensation for your flash. So in other words, you can make your flash brighter or darker depending on the situation you're in by increasing or decreasing those numbers there. And of course this last one is different flash options, like this is a red eye reduction, or you have a regular flash or rear curtain sync, which can make some interesting blurring effects. Okay. So, and that's pretty much the eye menu. Was any of those settings anything that you use a lot?
Yeah, I use the ISO quite a bit, depending on if I'm shooting indoors or outdoors. I have used some of the different metering functions as well as the autofocus, changing those around a little bit.
Very good. So here we have just a little quick tour of the Nikon D3200, and I hope that you learned something and that it helps you with your camera, and maybe even helps you decide what camera you want to buy, the 3200, the 3300, or maybe even a higher model. So Sean, I'd like to thank you for helping us with this video, and your camera was very useful and you were very helpful.
Great.
And again, this has been Gary D. Toncourt and Sean Griffin from morethanasnapshot.com.
If you like this video, please be sure to hit subscribe down at the bottom so you can see our future videos. Also, you might want to check out the show notes to see my other websites like morethanasnapshot.com, where you can take my online photography class. Also, like us on Facebook so you'll know what's new with morethanasnapshot.com.